Residents feared losing bridge access more than they feared the truth. The first time Vanessa Caldwell stopped my truck, she was standing behind a folding table in the middle of a bridge with a clipboard in one hand and a smile that told me she'd done this before. She charged me $90 to cross what she called an HOA bridge, threatened to call the cops, and acted like she owned the only road connecting my 2,700-acre ranch to the county highway. What she didn't know was that one unopened folder, one forgotten survey, and one set of bridge records were about to raise a question nobody in that subdivision wanted answered. By the time the sheriff arrived, the fines started piling up, and the courtroom doors opened. The fight wasn't about a bridge anymore. It was about who had been telling the truth all along. If you enjoy stories about ranch life, property rights, HOA overreach, and ordinary people standing their ground with patience and proof, take a second to subscribe and join us for more stories like this. Now let me tell you exactly what happened. The folding table sat in the middle of the bridge like somebody had dropped it there during the night and forgotten to pick it up. I hit the brakes hard enough to make the feed sacks shift in the bed of my truck. For a second, I thought there'd been an accident. Then I saw the handwritten sign. Bridge access permit required. A woman in a pale blue polo shirt stood behind the table holding a clipboard. 2 orange traffic cones blocked half the lane. A younger man leaned against a black pickup parked near the far side of the bridge. The bridge itself was the only practical route between my ranch and the county highway. Without it, getting feed, fuel, equipment, or emergency services onto my property would mean a 40-mile detour through rough ranch roads. I rolled my F250 to a stop. The woman smiled. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile people wear when they're convinced they have authority. "Good morning," she said brightly. "I'm Vanessa Caldwell, president of the Caldwell Pines HOA." I glanced around. The bridge crossed a narrow creek between my ranch and a subdivision built several years before I'd bought the property. I lived on 2,700 acres. They lived in 90-something houses. There wasn't supposed to be any connection between us. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Actually, yes." She flipped a page on her clipboard. "Before crossing this bridge, you'll need a bridge access permit." I looked at the sign again, then at her, then back at the sign. "You're serious?" Her smile widened. "Very." The younger man chuckled from beside the pickup. Vanessa continued. "The bridge is maintained by the Caldwell Pines Homeowners Association. Residents receive annual permits. Non-residents pay $90 per crossing." I stared at her for several seconds. I had spent most of my adult life running ranch operations and negotiating land leases. I'd dealt with oil companies, county officials, surveyors, and more lawyers than I cared to remember. But nobody had ever tried charging me a toll to cross a bridge in the middle of ranch country. $90, I repeated. "That's correct. And if I don't pay?" She tapped the clipboard. "Then I'll have to report unauthorized use of HOA property." I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because it was ridiculous. Vanessa didn't laugh. Neither did the young man. Apparently they had done this before. That's when I noticed the vehicles waiting behind me. A landscaping truck, a plumber's van, a dusty pickup pulling a horse trailer. Nobody was honking. Nobody was complaining. They just sat there, waiting. Like this had become normal. That bothered me more than the demand itself. People only stop questioning nonsense after they've been forced to live with it long enough. I leaned out my window. "How long have you been doing this?" Vanessa's smile faded slightly. Doing what? Charging people. It's part of community management. That wasn't an answer. The younger man stepped closer. His arms were folded. A cheap security badge hung from his belt. Sir, if you're not paying, you're holding up traffic. I looked at him, then back at Vanessa, then at the bridge. The concrete structure wasn't new. Weather stains marked the rails. The steel supports underneath showed years of use. It looked older than most of the houses in the subdivision. Much older. Something about that bothered me too. But this wasn't the place for an argument. Not yet. I reached into my wallet. Vanessa instantly relaxed, like she'd won. I counted out $90 and handed it over. She took the bills quickly, almost eagerly. Then she produced a receipt book from beneath the table. A real paper receipt book. Not a printed system, not an HOA form, just a generic receipt pad. She scribbled something down, tore off the yellow copy, and handed it to me. Bridge access permit, $90. Caldwell. That was it. No HOA logo, no permit number, no legal notice, just handwriting. I folded the receipt carefully and slipped it into my shirt pocket. Vanessa noticed. You'll want to keep that visible while crossing. I nodded. Good advice. The younger man smirked. Neither of them understood why I was keeping it. I eased the truck forward. The cones were moved aside. The feed rattled behind me. The bridge groaned softly beneath the weight of the truck. Halfway across, I looked into the rearview mirror. Vanessa was already taking money from the next vehicle. The landscaping driver handed over cash without saying a word. Like he'd done it before. Like everybody had. That bothered me even more. By the time I reached the ranch gate 3 miles later, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The bridge, the table, the receipt, the confidence. Confidence usually comes from one of two places. Either you're right, or nobody has challenged you. I parked near the equipment barn and unloaded feed. Normally ranch work cleared my head. That morning, it didn't. The entire time I worked, I kept replaying the scene. Vanessa hadn't acted nervous. She hadn't acted like someone making things up. She'd acted like someone enforcing rules she'd been enforcing for years. That was what didn't fit. Because if the bridge truly belonged to the HOA, why was there no official permit system? Why a folding table? Why cash? Why handwritten receipts? And why had every driver behind me looked so defeated? Around noon, I drove into town for fuel. At the feed store, I casually asked a cashier if she'd heard anything about bridge permits near Caldwell Pines. She rolled her eyes immediately. Oh, Vanessa. Just those 2 words. Nothing else. Like everybody knew exactly who I meant. Interesting. People actually pay? I asked. Most do. Why? The cashier shrugged. Cheaper than fighting with her. That answer sat with me the entire drive home. Cheaper than fighting. That was how people like Vanessa survived. Not because they were right. Because everybody else decided the fight wasn't worth the trouble. Late that afternoon, I crossed the bridge again. The folding table was gone. The cones were gone. The sign was gone. Only the bridge remained. Quiet. Ordinary. Like nothing unusual had happened there at all. I slowed the truck, studied the structure, the railings, the concrete, the steel. Something about it felt older than the subdivision, older than the HOA, older than Vanessa. And for the first time all day, a different question entered my mind. Not why she was charging people, not why everyone paid, not why nobody challenged her. A simpler question, one that refused to leave. Who actually owned that bridge? As I drove toward the ranch house, the folded yellow receipt remained tucked safely in my pocket. And without realizing it, Vanessa Caldwell had just handed me the first piece of evidence. The next morning, I found the second piece. It was taped to my front gate. A bright orange notice sealed inside a plastic sleeve. I pulled it loose and read it twice. Official HO, a violation. Violation number 17-A. Livestock visible from residential properties. Fine, $250. Corrective action required within 7 days. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. My cattle had been grazing that pasture long before Caldwell Pines existed. I turned the notice over. Nothing. No county seal. No legal citation. Just a signature. Vanessa Caldwell. HO, a president. I folded the paper and slipped it into the same drawer where I'd placed the bridge receipt. By lunchtime, a second notice appeared. This one complained about dust from ranch traffic. A third arrived the following day. Apparently, the color of my north fence was inconsistent with community aesthetics. By Friday, Vanessa had fined me nearly $1,000 for offenses committed on land she had no authority over. The strange part wasn't the notices. It was the confidence behind them. She wasn't acting like someone bluffing. She acted like someone who had been getting away with this for years. That Saturday, I drove to the eastern fence line to check water tanks. My nearest neighboring ranch belonged to Earl Whitcomb. Earl was pushing 80 and looked like he'd been carved out of old cedar. He was repairing a gate when I pulled up. "You look irritated," he said, before I even stepped out. "You ever hear of a woman named Vanessa Caldwell?" Earl groaned. Lord. That answer told me more than anything else. "You know her?" "Everybody knows her." I showed him the violation notices. He read them slowly. Then he handed them back. "She's still doing that." "Doing what?" "Acting like she owns everything she can see." I leaned against the fence. "What about the bridge?" That got his attention. Earl glanced toward the subdivision in the distance, then back at me. "You pay her?" $90. Earl shook his head. "Used to be 75. I stared at him. "Used to be?" "She's been collecting bridge fees for years." The answer hit harder than I expected. Years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. Nobody stopped her? Earl laughed. "Most folks just pay." "Why?" "Because fighting takes time." He tightened a bolt on the gate. Then his expression changed. Like he suddenly remembered something. "You know," he said slowly, "there was a dispute once." "What kind of dispute?" "Ownership." I straightened. "When?" "Long time ago, maybe 15 years. Who questioned it?" "Surveyor, I think." "You think?" Earl nodded. "He was doing work for a ranch owner south of the creek. Said something about property lines not matching what people assumed." "What happened?" Earl shrugged. "Nothing." "Nothing?" He left. Folks stopped talking about it. That bothered me. Real property disputes don't just disappear. Not in Texas. Not when land is involved. "Do you know who owned the ranch back then?" Earl shook his head. "No idea." Then he pointed toward my truck. But if I were you, I'd start reading whatever paperwork came with your place. The words followed me all the way home. That evening, I ate dinner at the kitchen table. Across from me sat a large unopened folder from the title company, the same folder I'd ignored since closing. I bought the ranch 6 weeks earlier. The transaction had involved hundreds of pages: deeds, surveys, tax records, easements, title insurance. Most buyers skimmed them. I hadn't even opened half of them. The ranch needed fencing repaired, water systems inspected, equipment serviced. Paperwork had stayed in the stack. Until now. I pulled the folder closer. The title company's seal was still intact. For several seconds, I just stared at it, thinking about the bridge, the tolls, the violations, the confidence. Then I broke the seal. Inside were maps, surveys, title reports, and county records. More paperwork than most people would willingly read. Normally, I would have gone through everything immediately after closing. This ranch purchase had been different. Too much work, too many priorities. Now I wondered whether I'd overlooked something important. I flipped through the first few pages. Property descriptions, boundary references, parcel numbers, nothing unusual. Then a folded document slipped free and landed on the table. A survey map, larger than the others, older too. The edges were yellowed. Someone had highlighted a section in faded red marker decades ago. My eyes drifted toward a narrow line crossing the creek, a line marked with a single handwritten note. I couldn't make out the words without unfolding the entire sheet. I started to, then stopped, because my phone buzzed. A new email sender, Caldwell Pines, HOA, subject, outstanding violations. I opened it. 3 additional fines. Total balance due, $1,450. Failure to pay may result in legal action. I stared at the screen, then at the folded survey map, then back at the screen. For the first time since meeting Vanessa Caldwell, I wasn't irritated. I was curious. Because something about this entire situation felt wrong. Not morally wrong. Legally wrong. The kind of wrong that starts small and ends in a courtroom. I closed the laptop, pulled the survey map toward me, and unfolded it another inch. Somewhere inside this stack of paper was an answer. And I was beginning to suspect Vanessa Caldwell didn't want anyone finding it. The next morning, I didn't get the chance to finish reading. At 6:52 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Bridge closed until further notice. HOA enforcement action. I stared at the message. Then I grabbed my keys. 10 minutes later, I rounded the bend leading to the bridge and found exactly what I expected. Vanessa had escalated. 2 orange construction barriers stretched across both lanes. A chain connected them. A large plywood sign sat in the middle. Private HOA property. No access without HOA authorization. Vanessa stood beside it, holding her clipboard. Her son Derek leaned against a pickup truck with his arms folded. 3 residents watched from the subdivision side. Nobody looked comfortable. I parked 30 feet away and stepped out. "Morning," Vanessa called. She sounded pleased with herself. "What is this?" I asked. "Enforcement. You blocked the bridge." "Correct. You understand this is the only practical access road to my ranch." She shrugged. "You should have paid your violations." I laughed once. "You think HOA fines let you shut down access to private property? You don't get to decide that." She held up a folder. "You currently owe $1,450. I recognized the number immediately. Every fake violation she'd sent. Dust, fence color, visible cattle. She'd simply added them together. You have no authority over my ranch. I disagree. That's not how authority works. Her smile vanished. For the first time, irritation appeared. Mr. Mercer, your property impacts our community. No. It absolutely does. No, Vanessa. Your community can see my property. That's different. Derek pushed off the truck. You gonna move or what? I ignored him. Move the barriers. Vanessa folded her arms. No. I pulled out my phone. So we're doing this? She smiled again. You can call whoever you want. Good. I hit the sheriff's office number. Her smile faded slightly. Apparently, that wasn't the response she'd expected. 20 minutes later, Sheriff Tom Grady rolled up in a county cruiser. Tall, gray-haired, calm, the kind of man who'd spent decades separating facts from drama. He stepped out and looked at the barriers, then the sign, then Vanessa. That order told me everything. Morning, he said. Vanessa immediately launched into her prepared speech. Sheriff Grady listened for nearly 2 minutes. She explained that the bridge belonged to the HOA, that I was violating community rules, that I refused to pay fines, that residents felt threatened. The moment she used the word threatened, I saw the sheriff's expression change. Not dramatically, just enough. Experienced lawmen notice exaggeration when she finally stopped talking. Grady turned toward me. Mercer? I handed him the yellow receipt. Then my phone. Dashcam footage from the toll collection. His eyebrows rose. Toll collection. Watch. The video showed Vanessa collecting money from me, then from 2 other drivers, then issuing handwritten permits. Grady watched the entire thing. When it ended, he handed the phone back. You charging tolls? He asked Vanessa. It's a bridge permit. Permit issued by who? The HOA. He nodded slowly, then pointed at the barriers. Who authorized these? The board. Any court order? No. Any county authorization? No. He stared at her for several seconds. That silence was worse than an argument. Vanessa started talking again. Fast. Trying to fill the space, trying to gain control. It didn't work. Grady finally raised one hand. Ms. Caldwell. She stopped. Do you have documentation proving HOA ownership? It's our bridge. That's not what I asked. It's always been ours. That's not documentation. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Only for a second. But I saw it. So did Grady. He walked to the barrier, picked it up, moved it to the shoulder, then moved the second one. Vanessa looked horrified. You can't do that. I absolutely can. But ownership disputes are settled with records. His voice remained calm, not folding signs. A resident on the subdivision side quietly smiled, the first smile I'd seen all morning. Grady turned toward me. You got documentation? Not yet. Then find it. He looked back at Vanessa. And if you have documentation, produce it. Neither of us answered, because both of us knew something important. One of us would eventually have documents. The other probably wouldn't. As the sheriff returned to his cruiser, Vanessa glared at me. You think you've won? No. Then why are you smiling? I hadn't realized I was. Because for the first time, since meeting her, something had changed. Not legally, psychologically. Vanessa had expected fear. Instead, she'd gotten scrutiny, and people who operate on authority alone rarely enjoy being questioned. I climbed into my truck, crossed the bridge, and drove back toward the ranch. The unopened survey map waited on my kitchen table. The old records waited. The answers waited. And now I had a sheriff's warning echoing in my head. Ownership disputes are settled with records, not opinions. By sunset, I intended to find out exactly what those records said. The survey map stayed spread across my kitchen table all afternoon. I worked through it the same way I'd handled contracts and land agreements for years. Slowly. Line by line. No assumptions. The highlighted section Earl had accidentally pointed me toward sat near the center fold. A narrow crossing over the creek. A bridge symbol. A handwritten notation I couldn't fully read until I unfolded the map completely. When I finally flattened the last crease, the words became clear. Mercer Creek Bridge Access. I stared at it. The subdivision wasn't called Mercer Creek. The HOA wasn't called Mercer Creek. The bridge had a name older than either of them. That alone didn't prove ownership, but it was enough to keep digging. I pulled another document from the folder, then another. Property tax records. Parcel surveys, title insurance schedules. Half an hour later, I found something that made me sit back in my chair. An improvement inventory attached to the ranch purchase. Fencing. Water wells, equipment sheds, livestock pens, and one entry that immediately caught my eye. Concrete bridge structure. Taxable improvement. Parcel 14-B, my parcel. I read it twice, then a third time. The bridge wasn't merely adjacent to the ranch. According to the tax documents, it was being assessed as part of the ranch itself. That was impossible, or at least it should have been. I grabbed my laptop and logged into the county GIS system. The parcel maps loaded slowly. When they finally appeared, I zoomed in on the creek. Then closer still. My heartbeat picked up. The bridge wasn't sitting on the boundary line. It wasn't straddling properties. It wasn't partially shared. The entire structure sat inside Parcel 14-B, my parcel. I leaned back. For several seconds, I didn't move, because suddenly the bridge fees made sense, not legally, psychologically. If Vanessa knew she didn't own the bridge, she had a motive to keep people from asking questions. Questions lead to records. Records lead to answers. And answers destroy convenient stories. I spent another hour reviewing documents. Then I found the piece that changed everything. Buried behind a maintenance report from 1997 sat a county engineering file. Bridge Rehabilitation Project. Mercer Creek Crossing. The report referenced repairs completed after flood damage. County crews had reinforced support beams and replaced sections of concrete. Most importantly, the report identified the landowner responsible for granting access. The Mercer Ranch. The ranch I now owned. I looked at the date. 22 years before Caldwell Pines even existed. The bridge had belonged to ranch property long before the subdivision arrived. I immediately reached for my phone. There was only one person I wanted reviewing this. Attorney Marla Jennings. Her office sat in Cedar Hollow, local, experienced, and known for winning property disputes. She answered on the third ring. Marla Jennings. Marla, my name's Cole Mercer. There was a brief pause. The new ranch owner? That's me. What can I do for you? I think an HOA president has been charging tolls on a bridge she doesn't own. Silence. Then, start from the beginning. 40 minutes later, I'd explained everything. The receipt, the violations, the sheriff, the parcel maps, the engineering file, the tax records. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she asked only one question. You have copies? Every page, email them. I did. 20 minutes later, she called back. Her tone had changed. Completely. Well, she said, that's interesting. Good interesting for you. I waited. The bridge appears to sit entirely inside your parcel. I looked down at the maps. That's what I found. So did I. What about the HOA? I checked county recordings. My pulse quickened. There is no recorded easement. I sat silently. No easement, I asked. None. Not expired? No. Not shared access? No. Nothing. Nothing. Those answers landed like hammer blows. Because if Marla was right, everything changed. Every toll, every threat, every violation notice, every claim of ownership. All of it rested on something that apparently didn't exist. Marla continued. Before you celebrate, listen carefully. I'm listening. Do not confront her. That surprised me. Why not? Because people like this rarely stop when challenged. I thought about Vanessa standing behind that folding table. She certainly didn't seem like someone who backed down. What do you want me to do? Document everything. I'm already doing that. Good. Keep doing it. She paused, then delivered the advice that would shape the rest of the fight. Let her keep talking. What? Let her keep making claims. I frowned. Why? Because every time she claims ownership, every time she issues fines, every time she threatens enforcement, she's creating evidence. The room felt very quiet. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. Marla's voice remained calm. Don't shut the bridge. Okay. Don't demand money back. Okay. Don't tell her what you've discovered. I looked at the engineering report, the parcel maps, the tax records. You're telling me to stay quiet. I'm telling you to let her dig. After we hung up, I started a new folder. Bridge file. The yellow receipt went in first, then the violation notices, then screenshots of Vanessa's emails, then copies of the bridge records. By midnight, the folder already contained more evidence than I expected to collect in a year. And the strangest part? Vanessa Caldwell had no idea. She still believed she was in control. She still believed the bridge belonged to her HOA. She still believed I was the one on defense. But sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at decades of county records, I realized something she hadn't. The bridge wasn't just near my ranch. The bridge was my ranch. And tomorrow, if Vanessa kept pushing, she was going to make that discovery very expensive. The next morning started with another email, subject, Final Notice. Vanessa had increased my balance from $1,450 to $1,900. Administrative penalties. Late fees. Compliance review costs. none of which meant anything legally. But they looked official. That was the point. People don't obey authority because it's real. They obey it because it looks real. I printed the email, added it to the bridge file. Then I went about my day. That afternoon, another message arrived, then another. By Friday, Vanessa had sent 6 separate communications demanding payment. Everyone went into the folder. Everyone strengthened my position. Marla was right. The more Vanessa talked, the more evidence she created. The following week, things escalated. A photo appeared on the Caldwell Pines HOA Facebook page. It showed my truck crossing the bridge. The caption read, "Resident alert. Outside landowner refuses to follow community rules. Legal action pending." I stared at the post for several seconds, then took screenshots. Comments started appearing underneath. Most came from residents repeating whatever they'd been told. "Protect our neighborhood. Don't let him take the bridge. Make him pay." A few comments stood out. Several people asked simple questions. What legal action? Why does the HOA own the bridge? Can someone show the documents? Those comments disappeared within hours. Deleted. That told me more than the post itself. Questions were becoming dangerous. By Wednesday afternoon, Earl Whitcomb called. "You got company. What kind?" I drove to the bridge. 2 men wearing reflective vests stood beside the entrance. Derek Caldwell supervised from the shoulder. A pickup loaded with signposts sat nearby. The old permit sign was gone. A new one was being installed. HOA Community Bridge, private property, authorized users only. I parked and stepped out. Derek immediately smiled. The same smug smile he'd worn during the sheriff incident. "Nice sign." He shrugged. "Looks official. That's because it's designed to." One of the workers looked uncomfortable. The other refused to make eye contact. I took photographs. Lots of them. The sign, the truck, the workers, the installation process. Derek watched me. "What are you doing?" "Keeping records." His smile disappeared. "Interesting." People who like power rarely enjoy documentation, especially when they don't control it. That evening, I emailed everything to Marla. 10 minutes later, she called. "Good." "Good?" "The sign. You like it?" "I love it." I laughed. "Why?" "Because they just publicly claimed ownership again." I sat back in my chair. Evidence, exactly. The next few days became a pattern. Vanessa made accusations. I documented them. Vanessa issued demands. I archived them. Vanessa posted warnings. I captured screenshots. The folder grew thicker. The emotional balance slowly shifted. Not publicly. Privately. Vanessa believed she was tightening pressure. In reality, she was building my case. Then she made a mistake. A bigger one. Late Friday afternoon, a certified envelope arrived. Inside was a formal-looking notice. An intent to file lien. I read it twice, then a third time. The HOA was threatening a lien against my ranch if I failed to pay fines they had no authority to issue. My first instinct was disbelief. My second was excitement. Because that crossed a line. A serious one. I called Marla immediately. She listened quietly while I read the notice. When I finished, she laughed. Not politely, not professionally, actually laughed. Marla? Sorry. What's funny? She just upgraded your case. I leaned back. Explain. If she files that lien without legal authority, she's creating an entirely new problem for herself. A big one. A very expensive one. For the first time since this started, I felt something other than frustration. Momentum. The power dynamic was changing. Slowly, silently, Vanessa still believed she was cornering me. But every move she made tightened a different trap. One she couldn't see. Before hanging up, Marla repeated the same instruction she'd given from the beginning. Don't engage. I won't. Don't threaten. I won't. Don't tell her about the bridge records. I looked at the engineering report lying on my desk. The one that changed everything. Trust me, I said. I won't. After the call, I opened the bridge file again. The folder barely closed now. Receipts, emails, violation notices, photos, social media posts, threats. Every page told the same story. A person claiming authority she couldn't prove, a bridge she couldn't document, and an ownership question she desperately wanted nobody asking. I closed the folder, turned off the office light, and for the first time since meeting Vanessa Caldwell, I found myself wondering something entirely different. Not whether she would stop. She wouldn't. Not whether she would back down. She couldn't. The real question was how far she was willing to go before discovering the bridge belonged to the very ranch she was trying to control. Because sooner or later, she was going to find out. And when she did, the damage wouldn't be measured in bridge fees. It would be measured in consequences. 3 days later, Vanessa gave me another piece of evidence. This one came with smoke. I was repairing a section of fence along the south pasture when I caught the smell. Burn brush. At first, I didn't think much of it. Ranchers burned brush all the time. Then I noticed where it was coming from. The creek. Near the bridge. I drove down in the truck and found a burn pile on the HOA side of the property line. Derek Caldwell stood beside it with 2 workers. Branches, dead brush, construction debris. The pile was bigger than it should have been. "What are you doing?" I asked. Derek barely looked at me. "Oh, a cleanup project. You have a permit?" He smirked. "We've got authorization." That wasn't what I'd asked. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Derek noticed immediately. Still collecting evidence? Still creating it? His smile disappeared. I drove away. The wind shifted less than an hour later. By the time I noticed the smoke column growing darker, flames had already crossed the creek. I hit the gas. By the time I arrived, fire was spreading through dry grass along the edge of my pasture. Not huge, not catastrophic, but moving. Fast enough to matter. I called 911. Volunteer firefighters arrived within minutes. The crew worked efficiently. Containment lines, water trucks, brush units. An hour later, the fire was out. 3 acres of grazing land had burned. Part of a fence line was gone. Several mature cedar trees were damaged. The worst loss sat near the creek. An old ranch fence corner that had stood for decades now lay blackened and twisted. I stood beside it while firefighters packed equipment. Anger settled in. Not explosive anger, the quiet kind. the kind that remembers. A county fire investigator arrived before sunset. He walked the burn path, measured wind direction, photographed ignition points, interviewed firefighters. Then he crossed the creek. 10 minutes later, he returned. "What started it?" I asked.
Find him.
He closed his notebook. "Brush burn."
Now.
No kidding. Origin point appears to be the HOA cleanup operation. I nodded. That wasn't surprising. Then he added something better. They didn't have a county permit. I looked up. What? They never filed one. Now that was interesting. The investigator continued. "We'll issue a report. Official. Official." I thanked him. Then I called Marla. She answered immediately. "Tell me something good." "The HOA set my pasture on fire." Silence. Then, "How much damage?" I explained. She listened carefully. When I mentioned the investigator's findings, she interrupted. "Hold on, you there?" "Oh, I'm here." Her voice had changed. The same way it changed when she saw the bridge. Records. County report. Coming. No permit. According to the investigator. She laughed softly. Not because the fire was funny. Because she understood what it meant. Another documented mistake. Another official record. Another layer of liability. "Photographs?" she asked. "Hundreds." "Good. Video, too." "Excellent." I looked across the pasture toward the creek. Smoke still drifted above the burned grass. "What do you want me to do?" "The same thing I've wanted you to do from the beginning." I already knew the answer. Document everything. Exactly. The official report arrived 4 days later. Cause of fire. Unauthorized brush burn. Origin, a maintenance activity. Responsible party. Under investigation. I printed 3 copies, one for the file, one for Marla, one for myself. Then I added the original to the growing folder. The bridge file barely closed anymore. Receipts, threats, emails, violation notices, photographs, bridge records, and now a fire investigation. What struck me most wasn't the damage. It was the pattern. Every time Vanessa faced resistance, she escalated. Every escalation produced evidence. Every piece of evidence strengthened the same story. A story she didn't realize she was writing. 2 days later, another post appeared on the HOA Facebook page. Residents were told that I was creating legal problems for the neighborhood, that I was threatening bridge access, that I was attempting to seize community property. I took screenshots, added them to the file. Then I noticed something new. Comments. More residents were asking questions. Where are the ownership records? Has anyone seen the easement? Why is the HOA involved in a ranch fire? The questions weren't disappearing fast enough anymore. The story was slipping. People were becoming curious, and curiosity is dangerous when your authority depends on nobody looking too closely. That evening, Marla called. Vanessa just announced an emergency HOA meeting. I sat up. When? Next Tuesday. I already knew what that meant. Vanessa wasn't trying to solve the problem. She was trying to control the narrative. What's the agenda? Marla paused, then read directly from the notice. Community defense strategy against outside landowner threats. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, I genuinely laughed. because I finally understood where this was heading. Vanessa thought she was putting me on trial. What she didn't realize was that she'd just invited witnesses. And witnesses have a habit of hearing things their lawyers later wish they'd never heard. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 7. By 6:45, the Caldwell Pines clubhouse parking lot was full. I parked across the street and walked the rest of the way. The invitation had specifically mentioned outside threats to community property. Apparently, I was the threat. I carried nothing except a small notebook. The bridge records stayed locked in my desk at home. Marla had been clear. Do not reveal your evidence. Not yet. Inside, more than 80 residents filled folding chairs. Vanessa stood at the front beside a projector screen. The moment I walked in, conversations stopped. A few people recognized me from the Facebook posts. Others simply stared. I took a seat in the last row. Vanessa noticed immediately. Her smile widened. Perfect. That was exactly what she wanted. An audience. 7 o'clock, she opened the meeting with a wooden gavel she seemed unusually proud of. The screen behind her lit up. A photograph of my truck crossing the bridge. Large red letters beneath it. Protect our community. I almost laughed. Instead, I listened. For 20 minutes, Vanessa spoke. According to her, I was attempting to seize HOA property. According to her, I was threatening residents. According to her, I intended to shut down bridge access entirely. Every statement made the room a little quieter. Not because people believed her, because some of them clearly weren't sure anymore. Questions were forming. I could see it. Then Vanessa made her move. The board is considering legal action, she announced. Several residents nodded. Others exchanged glances. Vanessa continued. We cannot allow outsiders to take what belongs to this community. The word belongs caught my attention. Ownership again. She couldn't stop talking about ownership. Because ownership was the foundation of everything, and she had no idea it was about to become the problem. A man near the middle of the room raised his hand. Have we actually seen the bridge paperwork? Vanessa didn't like that question. It showed. The bridge has been ours for years. That's not what I asked. A few people nodded. The room shifted slightly. Not against her. Not yet. But the certainty wasn't there anymore. Vanessa quickly moved on. Then she spotted me. Mr. Mercer. Every head turned. She smiled. Since you're here, would you like to explain why you're attacking this community? I stood. Slowly. The room became silent. Exactly the silence I'd hoped for. No, I said. Confusion crossed her face. No. I'm here to ask one question. Vanessa folded her arms. Go ahead. I looked around the room, not at Vanessa, at the residents, the people actually affected by all of this. Then I asked it. Can anyone show me the recorded easement proving this HOA owns the bridge? The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 10 seconds passed, then 15. Finally, Vanessa laughed, a little too loudly. We don't need paperwork. The room stayed silent. She kept talking. Everyone knows that bridge belongs to us. Several people exchanged glances. She didn't notice. It has always belonged to us. More silence. We maintain it. We control it. It's ours. There it was. 3 ownership claims, publicly stated, in front of 80 witnesses. I didn't smile. I didn't argue. I simply nodded. Thank you. Then I sat down. The reaction wasn't immediate. That's what made it powerful. People started thinking, quietly, individually. A woman in the second row whispered something to her husband. An older resident frowned. A man near the back pulled out his phone. Questions were spreading. Vanessa sensed it. Her voice became sharper, more defensive. She spent the next 10 minutes repeating the same points. Control, authority, ownership. But repetition isn't proof, and for the first time, people seemed to realize that. The meeting ended without a vote, without a decision, without the support Vanessa expected. As residents filed out, conversations filled the room. Real conversations. Not applause. Not agreement. Questions. I reached the parking lot before anyone stopped me. A voice called from behind. Mr. Mercer.
Find him.
I turned. An older woman approached slowly.
Now.
She looked nervous. I'm Linda Harper. I nodded. She lowered her voice. My husband uses that bridge for dialysis appointments. I listened. Vanessa told everyone you plan to close it. I don't. The relief on her face was immediate. I thought so. She glanced back toward the clubhouse. People are starting to ask questions. Good. She hesitated, then added something important. Most of us have never seen ownership records. There it was again. The same crack spreading through the foundation. Not anger. Doubt. And doubt is dangerous when authority depends on certainty. After she left, I sat in my truck for several minutes. My phone buzzed. A message from Marla. How did it go? I typed 4 words. She took the bait. A few seconds later, her reply arrived. Good. Now let her talk. I smiled. Because for the first time since this started, the fight wasn't happening between Vanessa and me. It was happening between Vanessa and the questions she could no longer control, and questions have a habit of surviving long after speeches end. The morning after the HOA meeting, my phone started ringing. Not reporters, not lawyers. Residents. The first call came from a man named Robert Jenkins. I'd never met him. He lived in Caldwell Pines. I heard you at the meeting, he said. Okay, I've got something you might want. An hour later, he handed me a folder in the parking lot of a diner. Inside were copies of HOA newsletters dating back several years. I flipped through them. Most were routine. Pool maintenance, landscaping updates, holiday events. Then I found references to bridge fees, special bridge assessments, bridge enforcement programs, resident access rules, thousands of dollars collected, year after year. I thanked him and added everything to the bridge file. The second call came from a retired teacher, then a contractor, then a widow named Linda Harper, the same woman I'd spoken to after the HOA meeting. Each conversation revealed a similar pattern. Fines, threats, warnings. Bridge access had become Vanessa's favorite tool. People paid because they were afraid not to. Not afraid of the bridge. Afraid of her. That realization bothered me more than anything else. The fight had started as a property dispute. It wasn't one anymore. The bridge had become leverage, a way to control people, and now the people were finally talking. That afternoon, Linda came to the ranch, She carried a manila envelope. Her hands shook slightly. My husband wanted you to have these. Inside were copies of correspondence from the HOA, warnings, violation notices, threats of penalties. Several referenced bridge privileges. One sentence stood out. Failure to comply may result in restricted community access. I read it twice, then looked up. How long has this been happening? Linda laughed sadly. Long enough that most people stopped asking questions. What about your husband? Her eyes dropped. He's on dialysis 3 times a week. I remembered her mentioning that. If we believed Vanessa, losing bridge access meant adding almost an hour to every zone trip. I said nothing. She continued. People get tired, Mr. Mercer. Of what? Fighting. That answer sounded familiar. Earl had said almost the exact same thing weeks earlier. People weren't complying because they agreed. They were complying because resistance was exhausting. Linda stood, then paused near the porch steps. You're not planning to close the bridge, are you? There it was. The fear Vanessa had spent weeks spreading. I shook my head. No. The relief was immediate, almost physical. She smiled for the first time, then left. After she drove away, I sat on the porch looking at the growing stack of evidence. Bridge records, tax records, violation notices, emails, Facebook screenshots, witness statements. The folder had become a case. That evening, Marla called. How many witnesses now? 8. Good. More keep calling. Even better. I could hear papers moving on her end. What are you working on? The hearing. I sat up. Already. The HOA filed that lien yesterday. I frowned. They actually filed it? They did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Vanessa had actually done it. Despite the bridge records. Despite the ownership questions. Despite the warnings. She had filed a lien against my ranch based on HOA fines she had no authority to issue. Marla finally broke the silence. That was a mistake. I figured. No, Cole, that was a very expensive mistake. I looked toward the dark outline of the pasture. The bridge sat somewhere beyond it. Quiet. Unchanged. Yet somehow at the center of everything. What happens tomorrow? I asked. We ask a judge to remove the lien, and then we show him why it never should have existed. The confidence in her voice settled something inside me. For weeks I'd been collecting evidence. Now the evidence would finally matter. Before hanging up, Marla gave me one last instruction. Bring everything. I will. Every email, every notice, every photograph. Already packed. Good. She paused, then added, and get some sleep. I laughed. Neither of us believed that was going to happen. Later that night, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The bridge file lay open in front of me. The first item inside remained the yellow receipt Vanessa had handed me at the folding table. $90. Bridge permit. The beginning of everything. I placed it on top of the stack, then closed the folder. Tomorrow a judge would see what I'd spent weeks building. Tomorrow ownership would stop being an argument and start becoming evidence. And somewhere in Caldwell Pines, Vanessa Caldwell was probably preparing for the same hearing. Still convinced the bridge belonged to her. Still convinced authority could replace documentation. Still convinced she'd win. It was happening between Vanessa and the questions she could no longer control. And questions have a habit of surviving long after speeches end. The morning after the HOA meeting, my phone started ringing. Not reporters. Not lawyers. Residents. The first call came from a man named Robert Jenkins. I'd never met him. He lived in Caldwell Pines. I heard you at the meeting, he said. Okay. I've got something you might want. An hour later, he handed me a folder in the parking lot of a diner. Inside were copies of HOA newsletters dating back several years. I flipped through them. Most were routine: pool maintenance, landscaping updates, holiday events. Then I found references to bridge fees, special bridge assessments, bridge enforcement programs. Resident access rules, thousands of dollars collected, year after year. I thanked him and added everything to the bridge file. The second call came from a retired teacher, then a contractor, then a widow named Linda Harper, the same woman I'd spoken to after the HOA meeting. Each conversation revealed a similar pattern. Fines, threats, warnings. Bridge access had become Vanessa's favorite tool. People paid because they were afraid not to. Not afraid of the bridge. Afraid of her. That realization bothered me more than anything else. The fight had started as a property dispute. It wasn't won anymore. The bridge had become leverage, a way to control people. And now the people were finally talking. That afternoon, Linda came to the ranch. She carried a manila envelope. Her hands shook slightly. My husband wanted you to have these. Inside were copies of correspondence from the HOA, warnings, violation notices, threats of penalties, several referenced bridge privileges. One sentence stood out. Failure to comply may result in restricted community access. I read it twice, then looked up. How long has this been happening? Linda laughed sadly. Long enough that most people stopped asking questions. What about your husband? Her eyes dropped. He's on dialysis 3 times a week. I remembered her mentioning that. If we believed Vanessa, losing bridge access meant adding almost an hour to every trip. I said nothing. She continued. People get tired, Mr. Mercer. Of what? Fighting. That answer sounded familiar. Earl had said almost the exact same thing weeks earlier. People weren't complying because they agreed. They were complying because resistance was exhausting. Linda stood, then paused near the porch steps. You're not planning to close the bridge, are you? There it was. The fear Vanessa had spent weeks spreading. I shook my head. No. The relief was immediate, almost physical. She smiled for the first time, then left. After she drove away, I sat on the porch looking at the growing stack of evidence. Bridge records, tax records, violation notices, emails, Facebook screenshots, witness statements. The folder had become a case. That evening, Marla called. How many witnesses now? 8, good. More keep calling. Even better. I could hear papers moving on her end. What are you working on? The hearing. I sat up. Already. The HOA filed that lien yesterday. I frowned. They actually filed it? They did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Vanessa had actually done it. Despite the bridge, records, despite the ownership questions, despite the warnings. She had filed a lien against my ranch based on HOA fines she had no authority to issue. Marla finally broke the silence. That was a mistake. I figured. No, Cole. That was a very expensive mistake. I looked toward the dark outline of the pasture. The bridge sat somewhere beyond it. Quiet. Unchanged. Yet somehow at the center of everything. What happens tomorrow? I asked. We ask a judge to remove the lien. And then? We show him why it never should have existed. The confidence in her voice settled something inside me. For weeks I'd been collecting evidence. Now the evidence would finally matter. Before hanging up, Marla gave me one last instruction. Bring everything. I will, every email, every notice, every photograph. Already packed. Good. She paused, then added, and get some sleep. I laughed. Neither of us believed that was going to happen. Later that night, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The bridge file lay open in front of me. The first item inside remained the yellow receipt Vanessa had handed me at the folding table. $90. Bridge permit. The beginning of everything. I placed it on top of the stack, then closed the folder. Tomorrow a judge would see what I'd spent weeks building. Tomorrow ownership would stop being an argument and start becoming evidence. And somewhere in Caldwell Pines, Vanessa Caldwell was probably preparing for the same hearing. Still convinced the bridge belonged to her. Still convinced authority could replace documentation. Still convinced she'd win. By this time tomorrow, one of us was going to be very disappointed. And for the first time since this began, I was certain it wouldn't be me. County Courtroom 3B wasn't large. A few rows of benches, a judge's bench, 2 tables for counsel. Simple, practical. The kind of room where facts mattered more than speeches. Marla Jennings arrived carrying 2 banker boxes. One held legal filings, the other held the bridge file. Weeks of evidence, every receipt, every threat, every notice, every mistake Vanessa Caldwell had made. The gallery was fuller than I expected. Residents from Caldwell Pines had shown up. Earl Whitcomb sat near the back. Linda Harper sat in the front row. Even Sheriff Tom Grady was there, not as a witness, just watching. Vanessa entered 10 minutes before the hearing. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her attorney walked beside her carrying a thin folder. Very thin. That caught my attention. Marla noticed it too. She leaned over. They're not prepared. I looked at the folder. Maybe. She smiled. No, they're not. At exactly 9 o'clock, Judge Ruth Bannon entered. The room stood, then sat. The hearing began. Vanessa's attorney spoke first. He argued that the HOA had maintained the bridge for years, that the community depended on it, that ownership was understood by everyone involved. Judge Bannon listened patiently, then asked a single question. Do you have documentation proving ownership? The attorney hesitated. Only briefly. But long enough. We have historical usage. That's not what I asked. The silence that followed felt expensive. Then Marla stood. Your Honor, we'd like to enter evidence. The judge nodded. Proceed. Marla walked to the evidence monitor. The first image appeared on screen. A county parcel map. Clear, official, highlighted in red. The bridge sat entirely inside Parcel 14B, my parcel. The judge leaned forward. The courtroom became very quiet. Marla moved to the next document, county tax records. The bridge listed as a taxable improvement attached to the ranch, year after year. No HOA ownership. No HOA taxes. No HOA responsibility. Then came the engineering file. Mercer Creek Bridge access. 22 years older than Caldwell Pines, built before the subdivision existed. Maintained through agreements with ranch ownership. The judge examined each page carefully. Vanessa's attorney stopped taking notes. The confidence was gone. Marla wasn't finished. She displayed the yellow receipt. The first piece of evidence, $90. Bridge permit. Signed by Vanessa Caldwell. Then the dashcam footage played. The courtroom speakers filled with Vanessa's voice. The bridge is maintained by the Caldwell Pines Homeowners Association. Non-residents pay $90 per crossing. Several residents exchanged looks. Some shook their heads. Then came the violation notices, the emails, the social media posts, the fire investigation report, the proposed lien. Every piece fit together. One story, one pattern, one person claiming authority she couldn't document. Judge Bannon reviewed the final exhibit, the transcript from the HOA meeting. Marla highlighted the relevant section. The judge read it aloud. "We don't need paperwork." She turned the page. "Everyone knows that bridge belongs to us." Another page. "It has always belonged to us." Judge Bannon lowered the transcript. The room remained silent. Vanessa stared at the table. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked uncertain. Not angry, not defensive. Uncertain. The judge addressed her attorney. "Do you have any evidence contradicting these records?" "No, Your Honor." The answer landed like a hammer. Because that was it. The entire case. Months of claims. Years of assumptions. Gone in 3 words. "No, Your Honor." Judge Bannon began reading her findings. The lien was invalid. Immediately removed. The HOA possessed no documented ownership interest in the bridge, no recorded easement, no recorded right of control, no authority to issue fines against my ranch, no authority to restrict access. Every sentence shifted power. Every sentence removed another piece of Vanessa's position. Then the hearing took an unexpected turn. Marla introduced one final set of records. Financial statements, HOA contracts, vendor payments. The room grew quieter with every page. Landscaping contracts, bridge maintenance contracts, consulting invoices. One company appeared repeatedly. Caldwell Property Services, owned by Derek Caldwell. Vanessa's son. Year after year. No competitive bids, no board review, thousands of dollars. The judge frowned. Vanessa's attorney looked genuinely surprised. That surprised me too. Apparently he hadn't seen those records beforehand. Judge Bannon set the documents down. "I believe this matter extends beyond today's hearing." Marla nodded. "We agree, Your Honor." The judge ordered the financial records preserved. She ordered discovery. She scheduled further proceedings. Then she delivered the ruling everyone would remember. The evidence presented today indicates that ownership of the bridge rests with Mr. Mercer. Silence. The HOA's claims to the contrary are unsupported by recorded documentation. More silence. The lien is hereby vacated. The words echoed through the room. Vacated. Gone. Finished. The hearing ended 10 minutes later, but nobody moved immediately. Because everyone understood what had just happened. The bridge wasn't community property. It never had been. And the person who'd spent years claiming ownership had just learned that in front of an entire courtroom. As people filed out, Linda Harper stopped beside me. Tears filled her eyes. Not sadness. Relief. My husband won't have to worry anymore. I nodded. No, he won't. Across the room, Vanessa remained seated. Her attorney spoke quietly beside her. She didn't respond. For weeks, she'd controlled the conversation. Now the records were speaking, and records are very difficult to argue with, especially when they're older than the story you've been telling.
If there's one lesson in this story, it's that patience matters when the facts are on your side. Cole didn't win because he was louder, tortured, or more connected than anyone else. He won because he took the time to gather the truth, keep good record, and let the evidence speak for itself. The rich record, the touch documents, the receipts, and the witness statement were on there long before the courtroom ever opened its door. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is stay calm long enough to let the facts catch up. And maybe that's worth remembering beyond land dispute and HOA meeting. A lot of people spend years believing they have no voice because they've been told that's just the way things are. But question master, documentation master, and standing your ground with dignity can make a difference, not just yourself, but for the people around you. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with an HOA and property dispute, or a situation where paperwork ended up telling a very different story than that people claim? If so, drop a yes in the comments. And if you believe facts should matter more than assumptions, type commenter below. And if you enjoy stories about ranch life, property rights, quiet determination, and ordinary people standing firm through legal and honest means, consider subscribing. We'll be glad to help you along for the next story.